Dr. Michael Obsatz, Professor Emeritus of Macalester College, and where he taught sociology and education classes for 40 years. He received his bachelor from Brandeis University in Massachusetts and his PhD in educational psychology from the University of Chicago. He's been a therapist in private practice and is now mentoring over 50 young men, many of whom I've met, and older males. He's presented workshops on shame and healthy masculinity all over the country. His books include Healing Our Anger, From Stalemate to Soulmate, and Raising Nonviolent Children in a Violent World, which won the 1999 Minnesota Book Award. He has co-produced an award-winning documentary. Mike also has, excuse me, I can only read with these glasses. He leads men's group currently and also boys groups. He's married to Gloria Smith. They have 6 children and 7 grandchildren. He's my friend, my mentor. Everyone, please welcome Dr. Michael Obsatz.
My story is, I grew up on a farm. Anybody else grow up on a farm here? We believed in hard work. My dad believed in hard work. I believed in complaining about hard work. And I was a minority kid in my neighborhood, and I was bullied for 7 years, which means hit, hurt, shamed, put down, ridiculed, humiliated, and made to feel like junk, crap, okay? I went through that, and I ended up like this. So something happened that was absolutely magical that got me from there to here. And what got me from there to here was support from people. And I wouldn't be here if not for that. My first psychology teacher was Abraham Maslow, who taught me I could be anything I want. So I decided to be anything I want, and what I want to be is a person who helps other people have the best possible lives they can have. That's what I want to be. That's what I am. That's my purpose. I think one of the greatest things in life is to figure out what your purpose is and do it, and then the riff-raff stuff in life doesn't bother you that much because you know where you're going. So I'm going to talk on the bullying thing. Went on and on and on, and then by the end of elementary school, 8th grade at that time, the bullies had either died or moved, and I was free. Somehow I was free. Things changed and I was free. And it was the most amazing feeling. But what I went through during that 7 years, and has anyone been bullied and experienced it? You know what it's like when you strategize how you're going to get home safe, how you're going to avoid certain people, how you're going to not say anything that's going to upset anybody. What that does, it's a trauma, and it affects your mind and your brain. What I'm going to be talking to you about tonight is the effect of shame and trauma on children, and as you grow up, how that affects how you are as an adult and what you can do to reclaim your wholeness, which gets taken away from you when you are hurt growing up. That makes sense? So I'm going to start by sharing one of my favorite books, The Drama of the Gifted Child by Alice Miller. And I'm going to tell you about what she says, which is really powerful. All children are born to grow, to develop, to live, to love, to articulate their needs and feelings for their self-protection. For their development, children need the respect and protection of adults who take them seriously, love them, and honestly help them to become oriented in the world. When these vital needs are frustrated and children are instead abused for the sake of adults' needs by being exploited, beaten, punished, taken advantage of, manipulated, neglected, or deceived without the intervention of any witness, then their integrity will be lastingly impaired. The normal reactions to such injury should be anger and pain, since children in this hurtful kind of environment are forbidden to express their anger, and it would be unbearable for them to experience their pain all alone. They are compelled to suppress these feelings, repress the memory of the trauma, and idealize those guilty of the abuse. Sometimes they have no memory of what was done to them. Dissociated from the original cause, their feelings of anger, helplessness, despair, longing, anxiety, and pain will find expression in destructive acts against others, criminal behavior, mass murder, or against themselves, drug addiction, alcoholism, psychic disorders, or suicide. If these people become parents, they will often direct acts of revenge for their mistreatment in childhood against their own children. And what happens very often in some families is there is what's called cross-generational trauma. From generation to generation is passed on. And if you're a person who experienced that, you may be carrying around the wounds and the pain of your parents, of your grandparents, of your great-grandparents. And what we find is there is such a thing as DNA that is historical, that if your family was oppressed in the past, even 4 generations ago, it can affect how you think, which is a pretty powerful thing to realize. So Alice Miller just says that what has to happen for children as they grow up is they have to reclaim their wholeness and realize the parts they put away weren't because those parts were bad. They put away those parts of themselves to survive. And they have to be grateful that they did that, or they would not have survived. So defenses are very often what saves our lives. So rather than being ashamed of having defenses, it's realizing that our defenses saved us. And then, as an adult, if those defenses aren't working for us anymore, we have to learn to let go of them. But we're loyal to them because they saved our lives. That's the struggle always, is why should I be different than I was when, after all, look what this did for me. It kept me alive. When you're 2 and you're afraid of being abandoned, you'll do anything to please those people who take care of you. When you're 40, you don't have to please them anymore. However, it's in your brain that you're supposed to please people. If that makes sense. This is very powerful stuff, because what we're realizing is shame and trauma in small children becomes imprinted in their actual brains. And what we know now is that brains can change. And the way brains can change is through a variety of things. One, meditation; other, self-hypnosis or hypnosis; group work, being part of a support network, creating safe space around yourself, creating your own family, your new family, your family of choice rather than your family of origin. So there are ways to change your brain, which is the magnificent thing to know, because what we're going to talk about tonight is shame and how people can recover from shame and move to grace. And what grace is, and we'll talk about that later, grace is the fact that no matter what any human being did to you, you were always whole and always lovable, no matter what they did. And you start putting your connection toward your higher power, who always loved you, and therefore what people do becomes less important. So it's freeing yourself from having to please and go along with like the current trends or who you're supposed to be. Now, I'm getting older now, and I think old is in, by the way. I think it's really in. And people say, oh, you get old and your mind just goes and all. You know, let me tell you, I'm sharp. I'm as sharp as I ever was. I have 50 mentees. I can tell you their entire life stories, all 50 of them, if you wanted to hear all of it. In other words, it's filed away in there. I haven't lost it. I'm going to be 74 next week, and I think, I've got another 25 years to go. I'm going to make the best of it. So what I'm saying is anybody can heal trauma, but it's not easy to do. And this organization is one of the organizations that really helps the process of healing trauma. There's an article by David Hendricks called Growing the Mind to Heal the Brain. And he says, if you have been abused in any way as a child, physical, verbal, or sexual abuse, witnessing a mother being maltreated, divorce or separation, or being raised by an addicted, mentally ill, or criminal parent, your brain will be different because of that. It will imprint your brain. But the good news is your brain can change. Your mind can change. Your feelings can change. You have the power, with your higher power, of creating the you that you always were with the you that you are now. I don't know if that makes any sense what I'm saying. So anyway, this is from a magazine called Spirituality and Health, and it's called Growing the Mind to Heal the Brain. One of the things that I've learned over time is Abandonment is a core issue for a lot of people. Anybody ever experience an abandonment issue, like feeling like you were going to be abandoned? So people could be abandoned physically, people can be abandoned emotionally, and people can be abandoned socially. In other words, social exclusion. Middle school girls are really good at abandoning people. They have been trained somehow really well to do that. Not that boys don't do it too, but they're very good at excluding. Have you ever experienced social exclusion? Okay, you know what it feels like. It ain't fun. However, what you realize is it's not about you, but it takes 40 years to get to that. When you're real small, it can't help but feel like it's about me. Remember in Good Will Hunting at the end where he says, it's not your fault, it's not your fault, it's not your fault? Anybody remember seeing that? Well, what kids do who are hurt is they blame themselves for the hurt. Because they don't think, it isn't, I'm a wonderful child of the universe who's totally loved by my higher power, and these parents don't know what they are doing. They don't say that. They say, these people must be right, there must be something wrong with me. Okay, you get that? So another kind of abandonment that's really crucial in all this is called self-abandonment. Self-abandonment is when you give up part of who you are to fit in, to please somebody, or to stay alive. You stuff your own feelings, you don't express your needs and wants, you stop nurturing yourself or you don't nurture yourself, you don't take care of yourself, you pretend to be what you're not, you make uninformed choices, which can involve self-sabotaging behaviors. Anybody done that? Okay. You can engage in addictive behavior, and you become what anyone wants you to be depending on each different situation. One person said to me, I can't believe it. I'm this way when I'm with these people, I'm this way when I'm this. Do I have a self? And I said, yeah, you have a self. You have a core self. Get in touch with it. All these other things are roles that you're playing, but your core self is beautiful. And I've got a guy now, 20, that I'm working with, and I keep telling him, you are loved and lovable. Say it. And he says it. I am loved and lovable. And he does tapping. There's a tapping thing that you can do energetically. And he says, I am lovable. I am lovable and loved. And he just says it. And it's almost like he's got to reprogram his brain to do that. So this kind of self-abandonment is in addition to being abandoned by other people. So we get abandoned. If we get abandoned by a person, sometimes we'll abandon ourselves as well. And it involves grieving. And two aspects of the grief process are anger and depression. And if you want to look at the culture, somebody said manic depressive culture. Yes, the grief process is what many people are going through because they've given up their whole selves. And so they are grieving. And therefore they are angry or they are depressed. They're taking it out on others or they're hurting themselves. That's a grief response to the fact that they weren't loved the way they needed to be loved when they were small and stopped loving themselves in that way too. Okay. So I hope this is interesting for you. Is it fitting with what you... Kevin Anderson, in another issue of Spirituality and Health magazine, wrote about brine. Bear with it. How to soak in divine brine. Okay? What does it mean to soak in divine brine? We'll talk about it as we go tonight. Kevin Anderson is a psychologist and marriage therapist who wrote about soaking in divine brine. His book's called The Inconceivable Surprise of Living. He begins, a pickle comes in for therapy. I have a problem, the pickle tells me. Everyone says I smell and taste like garlic all the time, and I'm sick of it. So I asked the pickle, as the therapist, could your problem be that you're always floating around in garlic-flavored brine? We are constantly soaking in some kind of brine. We have cultural brine, and we have family brine, and we have divine brine. If you're soaking around in cultural brine, you get repeated messages that you are not enough, you are not good enough, you do not have the right things, you are not young enough, you are not attractive enough, you are not thin enough, and it's always about not being enough. That's what the culture does to try to sell you things that you think will make you feel better, and when they don't, you have to buy more, and it keeps the addiction process going. Ann Wilson Schaef wrote this book called When Society Becomes an Addict, about 50 years ago or 40 years ago, and it was all about the culture is an addict. And if you buy into the culture, you end up doing addictive behavior because that's the only thing that fits the culture. Or so the idea of cultural brine is pretty powerful. Think of a cultural message that you got as a child about how you were supposed to be. How about big boys don't cry? Little girls, what? Sugar and spice and everything nice, but other things. What about little girls? What are little girls supposed to be? Quiet, neat, feminine, pretty, never get angry. Excellent. It's interesting. With the emotions, females were allowed a lot of the emotions except anger, and males were only allowed anger. So isn't that something? I mean, how do you talk to each other? Think about it. I mean, so there's cultural brine, and then there's family brine. Claude Steiner wrote a book called Scripts People Live, and he was talking about the scripts that go on in families and how you're taught to be what they want you to be, and you're the hero, or you're the villain, or you're the savior, or you're the clown, but somehow you get this message early on, you're supposed to live and be this, and your brother's brighter than you, so you better be the funny one because you can't be the bright one. I had somebody I did this a workshop similar to this morning, and somebody said, every time my brother was in school before me, the teacher would say, well, your brother's really smart. I don't see why you're not. And she's being compared to her brother every single day in school. So we have messages from the culture that tell us who we are, and then we have messages from our families who tell us who we are. And if they haven't worked through their stuff, your family, they're going to have some mixed ideas about who you should be. And the reality is, you're not anything they say, you are you. And they can either take it or leave it, but you can't say, see, I'm me, and I'm going to be totally self-sufficient right now, because you need them to support you, financially for sure, when you're small, okay? So you take onto your head that I've learned how to be what everyone wants me to be. So out of that comes indirect rage, okay? I get really mad at the stupidest things. Does anybody do that? I mean, I'll be behind a driver, and I can just want to just absolutely pretty much destroy them because they're not doing it the way I do it. How dare them? What happens when you get this situation and you get told who you are, you feel totally like you've lost control, okay? So what you do for the rest of your life is try to have control over everything and everybody and yourself and all situations. Anybody can relate to that? Yeah. Okay. And one of the most ways of being controlling is to be a perfectionist. Do we have any perfectionists in the room? And it's either my way or the wrong way, right? So a perfectionist very often is shame-based. In other words, part of this process to get you to perform the way the society wants you to and the way your family wants you to is to shame you into it and make you feel bad if you don't conform. So boys are shamed if they cry. Girls are shamed if they get mad. And there's all kinds of other things they're shamed for. But it's interesting how shame runs people's lives. Once you have to conform to what somebody else expects you to be. And then when you are, then after a while you go, well, who am I really then? Because you lose yourself in the process. And what recovery really is recovering the wholeness of who you are. Recovering all those parts. And realizing that you always were beautiful. You always were amazing. You always were lovable. It's just the rest of the people didn't get it. But it doesn't matter anymore because you have your higher power and you have your support network that you have created as an adult. Okay? That's the purpose of creating a support network, is you get the people who finally get who you are and will appreciate you for who you are. Make any sense? Okay. So John Bradshaw has written 2 books on shame. One is called Homecoming and the other one is called Healing the Shame That Binds You. And I'm going to talk a little bit about shame. Then we're going to get into talking about grace. Because grace is the answer to shame. Grace simply means You are lovable and accepted for who you are, no matter what anybody says or does. That is grace. And your higher power always felt that way about you. You always had it. You just didn't know it. Now you know it. And once you know it, then you can let people be where they're at. You can not take things personally, and you can smile when they say you're this or that and go, haha, that's what you think. I know who I am, and who you are is a child of the universe. You're not all the labels that they say you are, like your age. My age is none of my business. My chronological age is none of my business. What you think of me is none of my business. So really what this process is about is getting free and being a free person. And a guy who wrote about this is called Michael Singer, and he wrote a book called The Untethered Soul. And basically what he's talking about is getting free of all the things that have constrained you all your life. Getting free of those things so that you have yourself back and choice. Okay, so here's a poem about toxic shame from John Bradshaw. I was there at your conception. You felt me in the fluid of your mother's womb. I came upon you before you could speak, before you understood, before you had any way of knowing. I came upon you when you were learning to walk, when you were unprotected and exposed, when you were vulnerable and needy, before you had any boundaries. My name is toxic shame. I came upon you when you were magical. Before you knew I was there, I severed your soul. I pierced you to the core. I brought you feelings of being flawed and defective. I made you feel different, worthless, inferior. I told you there was something wrong with you. I soiled your godlikeness. My name is toxic shame. I am the master emotion, the internal voice that whispers words of condemnation. Anybody have internal voices that sometimes whisper negative things to you? I'm the internal shudder that courses through you without any mental preparation. I live in secrecy. I come from shameless caretakers, abandonment, ridicule, abuse, neglect. I'm empowered by the shocking intensity of a parent's rage, the cruel remarks of siblings, the jeering humiliation of other children, the touch that feels icky and frightening. I'm intensified by a racist, sexist, homophobic, ageist culture. My name is toxic shame. I bring a pain that is chronic, every day, everywhere. You cannot hide from me. My pain is unbearable, and you sometimes pass me on through control, perfectionism, contempt, criticism, blame, judgment, power, and rage. My pain is so intense, you must cover me up with addictions. My pain is so intense, you must numb me out and no longer feel me. I am the core of codependency. Interesting? Okay, I'll talk about codependency later. I am spiritual bankruptcy. I am crime, violence, incest, rape. I'm insatiability and lust. I twist who you are into what you do and have. I murder your soul, and you may pass me on for generations. My name is toxic shame. Pretty powerful stuff. There's an antidote to this, and that's what we're going to talk about. But first we're going to talk about how shame works and why it's so powerful. Of course, shame is the feeling of being worthless on the inside, of not being good enough, of being bad at your core. I don't know if any of you have ever read Brene Brown stuff. Her recent stuff is all about shame and imperfection. And the idea if you're imperfect, you can feel shame. But the reality is nobody is perfect. Therefore, you're a lovable child of the universe who occasionally doesn't do everything perfectly. All right? You're perfectly imperfect. Say it. I am perfectly imperfect. That's beautiful, huh? So what happens, shame is different than guilt, because when a person feels guilt, it's because of what they did. And he said, I did this bad thing. I can undo it. I can make amends for it. I did this bad thing. And it's okay to say you did a bad thing. But shame is, I am a bad thing. And that's the difference. So you can make amends for what you do, But the fact that you're whole and you're beautiful, you don't ever have to apologize for anything because you always were. You just had to come into your own power of knowing it. And what happens with shame, which is the most important thing, is that it gets internalized. In other words, if people shame you, you start doing it to yourself. So you say the words that they said and you start believing it's true. And it's not true, but they said it, so therefore it must be true when you're a small child. And when you're older, you still can feel sometimes like they know what they're talking about better than me. So part of healing shame is you have to not care what the world thinks and only care about what your relationship is with the higher power and try to live in integrity as much as you can from the inside out. What we do as a culture is we teach people how to live from the outside in, create an image, and then live it, instead of living from the inside out. There's a couple of types of shame. Cross-generational shame means that if your father or your grandfather was hurt and wounded, you may, as a son, carry those wounds inside of you generations later. Don't you think that some of the racial issues come from generations of suffering? They're generational. They took place, the hurts took place a long time ago and continue to take place. But it's still a wound that that affects generation after generation. So we have cross-generational shame. And then we also have what's called direct shame. And direct shame is when somebody shames you and they say, boy, that was dumb. You're so dumb. You're such a dumb person. That kind of thing. And we still experience that today, right? Sometimes people will say that. And what you do when they say that is you smile at them and you go, what do you know? The reality is you don't even totally know yourself, right? So how can anybody else know you? Isn't that interesting? And labels are baloney, okay? Male and female, yeah, okay, I'll buy that. You're male or female. But that's not who you really, deep down you're a child of the universe, male or female. Deep down, that's what you are. And labels like, oh, I'm ADHD. I don't know if you're a human being, a person, a child of the universe, a child of God, who happens to have a learning issue. It's a whole different way of talking about it. Third kind of shame is called maintained shame. And that's when you do stupid stuff that gets you in trouble, that self-sabotaging behavior that makes you feel bad and makes you feel like you deserve to be treated bad all over again, right? Has anyone ever done self-sabotaging behavior? Okay. Part of it is you don't know any better. Part of it is there's a part of us that wants to maintain the shame stuff in ourselves because you're used to it. You get comfortable being miserable. Has anyone ever been comfortable being miserable? Okay. One of the life scripts that I didn't mention from Claude Steiner is called awfulizing. Has anyone ever heard about awfulizing? Oh, life is awful. Oh, everything is awful. Oh, and you walk around and everything's just awful. It's just awful all the time. Oh, Okay, that's called awfulizing. I learned that it's interesting. The fourth kind, besides maintained shame, is called cultural shame. And that we talked about. That's cultural brine that says, you're not enough. You're not good enough. You're not this enough. It's interesting, if you grow up in a family, did anybody grow up in a family with shame? I don't think we don't have anybody here who did that, right? Anybody? Yeah. I think so, huh? Okay. There are rules in the family when there's shame involved. By the way, everybody has a little bit of shame. Some people have a moderate amount of shame, and some people have a ton of shame, okay? It isn't like, oh, I don't have any shame, because everybody is affected by the culture. Everybody is affected by their family in some way, and no family's perfect, okay? But the people who have a ton of shame are the ones who act out the most, okay? So when you look at the guy in Greenwood who killed his entire family recently, do you remember reading about that? I bet underneath there had to be some shame going on. There had to be some of that going on for somebody to do something like that. And you take any horrendous crime and you know there's shame involved in that. So the first rule, and the most important rule in a shame-based system, is always be in control. All right? So when you say, I'm going to give myself over to my higher power, that is a recovery response, not a shame response. Because People who have a lot of shame want to be in control. Why? Because when they were small and they were hurt, they were not in control of anything, and it destroyed them. Therefore, I'm never going to ever go through that again. I want to always be in control. Right? There's another book called The 5 Things We Cannot Change, and one of the things that we cannot change is that everything changes and ends, and we are not in control of that, as much as we want to be. Second rule of a shame-based system is be perfect. Always be correct. Always do the right thing. Never make mistakes. So what I notice with people who have a lot of shame is they go from feeling perfect to worthless. In other words, I'm perfect, I made a mistake, now I'm worthless. There's no like, hey, I'm just a human being doing the best I can, and occasionally I'll mess up. So the whole middle gets taken out. There's no shades of gray. There's no 50 shades of gray, okay? There's just black and white. Blame yourself or others for everything as a rule of a shame-based system. It's always got to be somebody's fault. It's either your fault or somebody's fault. Shame-based persons are taught that if something doesn't happen the way you want it to, that's control, right? It's somebody's fault. And how could they do this to me is the other thing. Like, you take it personally when things don't work out. It's like, I didn't want it to be this way. How did it turn out? How did it turn out that I had to have 2 hip replacements? That's not fair. But you know what? It's the best thing that ever happened to me, and I appreciate my hips more than I ever did. Another rule of a shame-based system is to compare yourself to others all the time. And do we think we do that in America very much? That's what America is all about, is comparing. Sweet. Oh, thank you very much for that. Good. Compare yourself to others and either feel superior or inferior. So you're either better than everybody or worse than everybody. So if you're better than everybody, then you're arrogant. And arrogance is a reaction to shame very often. By the way, the things that were mentioned, the 4A things, were all shame-related things. The anger and the arrogance. Huh?
Not a surprise.
Not a surprise. Deny your feelings. Another rule, deny your feelings. Like, don't feel. You can't feel that. How could you feel that? After all we've done for you? Have you heard that? Who's heard that? After all we've done for you, how can you dare have a life of your own? Have you ever heard that? No, you're smiling. Yes, yes. And we don't talk about it. Okay? So when we talk about, mass shootings and we talk about horrific things that happen in the world, we don't very often talk about the shame underneath it, the oppression underneath it, the disparities underneath it, the suffering underneath it. And I learned from a guy named John Brantner, who was a professor at the University of Minnesota, who has passed away, who was in the oncology department, and he worked a lot with people who were dying. And he said there were 2 kinds of suffering. One kind you cannot avoid. There will be suffering of certain kinds. The other kind we make up ourselves. And shame is one of the kinds of suffering we make up ourselves that we can do something about. So that's pretty important, I think. Now, how do you recognize when there's shame present? According to John Bradshaw, there's certain things that you look for, and if you see them, you start asking, is this shame-based behavior? One of them is perfectionism. Okay, I could never be wrong. Another is striving for power and control. Now think of a couple of presidents of the United States who were striving, don't laugh, or somebody's laughing, who were striving for power and control and ended up doing really bad self-sabotaging behavior. Can you think of anybody who did that? Nixon, okay. Is that he? Oh, he's the only one, okay.
Bill Clinton.
Oh, yeah, okay, we got a couple of them. By the way, when the Founding Fathers said all men are created equal, what they meant is all white, heterosexual, Christian men of high status who had a lot of money are created equal and everyone else isn't. I'm not making this up, am I? Who had to work to get the vote? That excluded children, it excluded women, it excluded African American people, Native Americans and so on. They're not equal, but they're not people, you get it? That is the issue. If you start seeing people as not people, then they don't count. That's why a concept like Black Lives Matter is, hey, we are people. Get over it, okay? Another Criticism and blame is another sign of shame. Criticism and blame. Caretaking and people-pleasing can be a sign of shame. I'll give you an example of a codependent song. I can't live if living is without you. Or the line from Jerry Maguire, who knows it? You complete me. I am not whole without you. Therefore, I need you to make me feel okay. In other words, called codependency, right? Okay. I tell people you have to be the cake and then the relationship can be the icing. But if you try to make the relationship the cake, it ain't going to work. There has to be two cakes in a relationship and then delicious icing poured over both of them. Then you got a good thing. But very often there's a person is trying to make you. Somebody thinks that's funny. That's good. All right. Compulsive addictive behaviors are signs of shame. Okay? Eating disorders are signs of shame. Eating disorders are about control, right? Anytime you think about control, very often it's related to shame. Okay? Drama. Addicted to drama. Does anyone know anybody like that? That is a shame response to being addicted to drama because it's an addiction. Do you know anybody who has to make a dramatic thing out of something? Probably you don't, but okay. Rage. Dave Decker on our website, my website and Dave Decker's website, which we've had for over 15 years now, is called angerresources.com. And it's one word, angerresources with one R.com. Dave wrote a really great article called The Shame-Rage Connection. And it's on we have 20, 30 articles on our website, more, maybe 50, that are all free. And if you want to check them out, you can just go look at them. But his thing was about anger, because he's an anger specialist. He's an anger management guy. He does a lot with domestic violence and so on. Was all about that whenever there is rage, there is always shame. And if you don't treat the shame, you're not going to deal with the rage. Because the rage is a sign that there's unlovability inside. So this gives you an idea of some of the defenses that people use against feeling their shame. Now here's the most powerful thing. When people have internalized shame, their mind changes and they develop certain thought distortions. In other words, they think differently, just like that article said about the brain. And what we have to do is recorrect the brain into a better way of thinking when that has happened. So here are some of the thought distortions. They must be talking about me, right? Everyone should do it the way I do it. Should, must, ought thinking. Blaming everybody. Either or thinking. It's either this or it's that. There's no middle. Couldn't be sometimes this, sometimes that. Couldn't be in the middle. It's either this or that. Filtering. Filtering is always looking for the negative in whatever. This person walks by you and they don't say hello, and you can right away say, well, that's because they don't like me. It's not about that. So what happens with shame is there's shame becomes self-talk. Anyone do self-talk? Do you know Michael Singer says that there's like 50,000 thoughts a day for a person. And if there's negative self-talk, that's 50,000 negative things that a person is doing in a day. That's a lot of thoughts. So negative self-talk results in negative emotions and feelings, which results in behaviors. Your thoughts affect your feelings affect your behaviors. It's interesting. So you can't afford the luxury of a negative thought. That is the name of a book. Have you heard of it? I don't remember the author's name, but it's a great book. You cannot afford the luxury of a negative thought. Because what we think about, we bring about. So one of the antidotes to shame is positive affirmations. And I suggest everybody do 2 things tonight or tomorrow or the next day, and that is write a list of 10 positive affirmations about yourself and your life. And the other thing is to write a list of what you're grateful for, a gratitude list. Because I tell you, there are people who have it worse than you. Believe it? Yeah. And you have it pretty good compared to a lot of people, and you have a lot to be grateful for. And I think part of connecting with the higher power is realizing how blessed you are. You are blessed and a blessing. Take that in for a minute, because that's pretty strong. How are we doing for time? We're good. Okay, good. If we're fortunate, we become immersed in a different kind of brine, and that's called divine brine. The brine says that we are lovable as is, just like a used car. You ever see a sign on a used car that says you buy it as is? Well, we are lovable as is. Not when I do this and that, not when I accomplish this or that, but now, as is. We are children of the universe, unique and special. We come through our parents, but we come from our higher power. That means that our higher power is more immediately our family than anything else. Our parents are the way we got here biologically, but our higher power is how our souls got here. Good stuff, huh? It's really, somebody write that down, because I think that, I haven't said that before. That's good. Now, Marianne Williamson wrote a book called Return to Love. And she says, when we were born, we were programmed perfectly. We had a natural tendency to focus on love. Then we were taught to think unnaturally. We were taught a way of looking at the world that contradicts who we are. We were taught to think thoughts like competition, struggle, finite resources, limitations, guilt, bad, death, scarcity, and loss. Love is what we were born with. Fear is what we learned here. Pretty powerful. I'm going to share a couple of other things from her, because she really helped me out a lot. I tell you, reading this book was really good because it made me really focus. It's called Return to Love, and what that means is you always were love. You just lost it for a while, but now you return to it. It never went away. You just didn't get it for a period of time. I'm going to see where this is, because it's really good. So what happened? When we reached a certain age, looked around, the enchantment was gone, because we were taught to focus elsewhere. We were taught to think unnaturally. Okay, I mentioned that. We were taught to think those thoughts. Love is what we're born with. Fear is what we learned here. The spiritual journey is the relinquishing or unlearning of fear and the acceptance of love back into our hearts. Love is the essential existential fact. It is our ultimate reality and our purpose on earth. To be consciously aware of it, to experience love in ourselves and others, is the meaning of life. Think about how powerful that is. Meaning doesn't lie in things. Meaning lies in us. When we attach value to things that aren't love, the money, the car, the house, the prestige, we are loving things that can't love us back. We are searching for meaning in the meaningless. Money itself means nothing. Material things of themselves mean nothing. It's not that they're bad, it's that they're nothing. We have come here to co-create with God, Spirit, higher power, by extending love. Life spent with any other purpose in mind is meaningless. Wow, good stuff. Love isn't material, it's energy. It's a feeling in a room, in a situation, in a person. Money can't buy it. Sex doesn't guarantee it. It has nothing to do with the physical world, but it can be expressed nevertheless. We experience love as kindness, giving, compassion, acceptance, non-judgment, and intimacy. So that's Marianne Williamson's beautiful stuff about that. With divine brine, remember we're soaking in divine brine now, because when you talk about higher power, you're in divine brine. So no more pickle jar, no more pickles. Now you're all of a sudden what, maple syrup or something really sweet. Lewis Smead says in his book Shame and Grace, and I do have it here to find it, he says, Grace accepts the whole of us with no regard for our beauty or ugliness, our virtues or our vices. We are accepted once and forever at the ultimate depth of our being. We are accepted by God or higher power with a lavish generosity. How do we immerse ourselves in divine brine? People do it all kinds of ways. They can go to a meeting, they can go to a church service, they can go do prayer or meditation or music or nature or positive self-talk or affirmations, a support group or rituals. All these things are really crucial to do to soak in divine brine. So one of the things that we do, that we have to learn, is we have to work on healing the inner child in us. The part of us that was hurt, the part of us that was, think parts were taken away from us, and we have to heal that. And the way we heal that is you say to yourself, I am lovable. The little boy inside me who was hurt, the little girl inside me who was hurt, was always lovable. And what you have in yourself is a divine part of you, a divine child part of you that was never hurt, and a material part of you that was hurt. So the divine child part of you has to comfort the material part of you inside the material child part of you to say, you were always beautiful. You were always special. You were always lovable. And what happened to you wasn't your fault, and it wasn't true. You deserve every good thing because you are a child of the universe. It's really powerful, powerful thing. So this is Charles Whitfield, who wrote Healing the Child Within. See if I have Lewis Smedes in here. He's gone somewhere, but we'll find him. Back to the only way out is in. The only way out of suffering is to go inside and to experience your wholeness and your oneness with all of creation and with spirit, with higher power. Because you're a wave and you're part of the ocean. But you are the ocean and you are the wave. And the ocean never dies. And the wave may change form, but the ocean and the wave are all together and all part of each other. So what I'm going to share with you is just a couple of statements from Ann Wilson Schaaf, who wrote a book called Living in Process. And I think this is, living in process means giving up control. Living in process means that each moment and each person is unique, and labels are a waste of time. Process is not personal, it just is. Life is meant for participation, not spectatorship. We learn by doing. There is nowhere to get to. You already have all of it inside you. You already have it all. Our major decisions are discovered, not made. Negativism erupts when we don't take care of ourselves. Solitude is a necessary component of growth. We have to be and love who we are before we can evolve into what we can become. Beautiful. That's Ann Wilson Schaaf. One of Charlie and my favorite people, right, Charlie? Amen. Michael Singer, in his book, The Untethered Soul, says this at the end of the book. Your relationship with God is the same as your relationship with the sun. If you hid from the sun for years and then chose to come out of your darkness, the sun would still be shining as if you never left. You don't need to apologize. You just pick up your head and look at the sun. It's the same way when you decide to turn toward God. You just do it. You can't offend the Divine One. Its very nature is light, love, compassion, protection, and giving. You can't make it stop loving you. Ecstasy is the only thing God knows. God's nature is eternal, conscious bliss. Now try to get on that idea. You can experience this ecstasy, and when you begin to feel this joy, then you'll know God's nature. Then nobody will upset or disappoint you. Nothing will create a problem. It will all appear as a part of the beautiful dance of creation, unfolding before you, your natural state will get higher and higher. You'll feel love instead of shame. So part of this is there's God outside you, beyond you, within you, around you, everywhere, and all you do is catch it and start living it, and it happens. And once you start living that way, things come to you that you never would have thought could come to you. You don't have to even go for them. Somebody's nodding. Is that true? They just come to you, right? One term for that is the law of attraction. There's other terms for that. But when you start centering, and it's interesting, there's an old Christian hymn, I don't know how old it is, seek ye first the kingdom of God and all will be given to you. Okay, it's a great hymn. It just basically is saying focus on the higher power and don't take what other people say or do around you so seriously, because it doesn't matter. So our lives matter, but what some people say or do doesn't matter, okay, in terms of defining who we are. Now, we do want to stand up for injustice. We do want to take a stand on certain things, but nobody can take away our divinity inside. That's yours. I'm going to do a meditation with you as part of our last thing that we do. And maybe we could dim the lights a little bit, but leave them on right here. Can anybody do that? Thank you, Charlie. Thank you. That's good. That's not good. That's better. Thank you, Charlie. That's good. Okay. This is an overcoming shame and guilt meditation that I am publishing and I'm making $1 million from. So it is relax and close your eyes. Let go of any thoughts. This is a time to remember who you really are. You, dear one, are a child of God. You are a child of the universe. You are loved. You are forgiven. God empowers you. You are blessed beyond measure. You are more than what you look like. You are more than what you do. You are filled with infinite potential. God's love flows through every part of your body. Feel it. You are the essence of wholeness. You are the essence of light. You are meant to be you here now. Your divine purpose is to know that you are loved, and you spread that love into the world. Nothing can separate you from the love of God. You are not alone. You are blessed. And this is from God. My beloved, come rest with me a while, beyond the place of constant overcoming. Know that I am always with you. Feel my presence, for I am closer than your hands and feet. You are my treasure, and I cherish you beyond the expression of words, and I understand the questions of your heart. I am aware of your every need and concern, and I come to assure you that I am with you in every situation, because that's how much I love you. I hear your prayers for healing, and I am within you as a mighty power of healing energy, restoring every cell and organ of your being. My light within you is so powerful that disease cannot hide from me, and I will conquer the battle of disharmony within your being, because that's how much I love you. No matter what you say or do, you can never be separate from my love. You are my perfect creation, and I will always see the perfection in you. And when the road seems long and sometimes difficult, and you may stumble and fall, I will always be there to lift you up and comfort you, because that's how much I love you. And in times of confusion or doubt, when you ask, should I go this way or that way, I will help you choose the fork in the road and be your constant companion. I will guide you with a light that never dims and be with you through your darkest hours to help you see the dawn of a new day, because that's how much I love you. I know when you need to be lifted up and when your weary body needs to be sustained. Trust me in all that you do, and I will not fail you. Have faith in me as I guide you along the way. Do not fret about what tomorrow may bring, for I am your God, the giver of all life, the healer of all wounds. And whenever you set time apart with me and look within, you will find me and my abundance for you. For I long to give you the prosperity of your dreams and desires, because that's how much I love you. Slowly, slowly come back to the room. Thank you, Charlie. And now I want to ask you a question. How did that feel for you? Affirming. Anybody else have a reaction to that? Consoling?
Peaceful.
Peaceful.
Trusting.
Trusting. Joyful.
Loving.
Loving.
Safe.
Safe.
Very moving.
Moving.
Healing.
Healing. So if you can stay focused on that, little things in the world where people are petty or mean or stupid in terms of how they treat you, or they want to put you down or anything, it doesn't matter, because they have no power over you. And you are a child of the universe, and that is what matters the most. So I hope you take that away with you tonight as we talk about healing shame, because grace is the answer to shame, and God's love is the answer to shame. And that's what you got. You already have it. You just have to know it and connect with it. But it's already there. It's in this room. You can feel it in this room. So thank you very much.